Yes, good evening. Welcome to Vedanta Series Question and Answer. We have decided to shift the Q&A session to tonight, to Tuesday, for several reasons. And so tomorrow we'll give the talk. So before you formulate your questions, you say the prayer, usual prayer for teacher-student. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanao Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditam Astama Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May that one protect us both. May that one nourish us both. May we work together with great vigor and energy. May our study be illumined. May we not unnecessarily cover with each other. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. Anyway, we have two questions from participants here. And I remember the first question, and the participant will tell you what the second question is. So the first question is this: very often in meditation we're asked to pray, and the definition of prayer in this case will be the listening to the quiet inner voice of God. We want to put it that way. And so very often a person says, yes, but when I sit, the only thing I hear is my own voice, my inner voice. Because, of course, we're all listening to ourselves all the time. Even if there's nobody there, an inner conversation seems to be taking place. And when we sit, of course, that continues. I suppose the counter question to that would be, what is the content of your inner voice? And if the content of your inner voice is to do with all the rest of your waking life, all your activities and difficulties and problems and pressures and all the rest of it, well, then it means something has to be done in situ before your meditation. And that is why the Bhagavad Gita, on its whole section of meditation, chapter 6, doesn't begin with meditation. And it's why the handbook or the textbook, step-by-step guidance on meditation, namely Patanjali Yoga Sutras, in his Ashtanga Yoga, the first step is not sit down and meditate. The first step is yama. That is, how are you conducting your habitual life in ordinary time? So the question arises about the unconscious mind. There are some people who say that we are living unconsciously, but that wouldn't really be true. We're always conscious, at least of our own existence. And when things surface, we're conscious of those things. And there's a kind of inner, subtle variety of impressions, all from previous experience, gathered in the conscious mind, assembled, and then put into a kind of ethereal mode, a kind of subconscious, underlying layer or area, where things are stored. And the collective name for this is samskaras. Samskara means all of those things assembled there, and some of them will be passions. And sometimes passions, the word passion and samsara, these are mixed up, but actually samsara means any impression. Even now, whatever you're thinking, whatever you do, gets carbon copied, as it were, into the unconscious area, into a library of experience. And that has the effect of building the future and have a pulling power that draws things toward you. Thought is a suction. And that is why we have to be careful about the content of the conscious mind, and we cannot reform the unconscious and its pulling power directly. We have to do it through the conscious gateway. And that is, we have to make sure that the mind is always in an elevated position through various techniques. First thing we have to do is look at the world in a different way. if we look at the world as every other creature looks at it, then all we'll be doing is we'll be in survival mode. All we'll be doing is we'll be taking an assumed individuality and fighting tooth and nail to protect it. And we've just done the Enneagram, and we know that there are 3 basic survival strategies that we have. But it's all to do with the natural selection, struggle, and so on and so forth, that does not explain man's moral and ethical position, the capacity to transcend our biological nature. And with this capacity, we can refine it. That refinement is called spiritual practice. And it means that we have to take all the noble ideas, all the best ideas that we have, and allow them priority on the stage of our mental life. That's all. That means when we sit for a meditation, the content of what comes out will not be to do with all the distractions and difficulties and interactions from, say, work. They will be of a different kind. They won't be of the domestic area, to do with all the 101 things that we have to cope with in life, but they will be of a different character. Now, how do we make this a different character? As I say, we have to have a different view. We have to learn to shift our attention. We have to glide across the border of individual disturbance, as God sees it. Try to sit on his golden throne and see that the world is good. Not that it is bad, not that it needs correction, but to see that it is full and free and perfect. And all the waves are dancing, and they're not different from that God. All of the waves are there as manifested forms of the same thing. It's like a spider, says the Mundaka Upanishad, weaving a web from itself. It's not that it has a second-hand material and creates the world like a potter makes a pot. The world in which we see is nothing more than seemingly fragmented God. It's only one thing, says our highest conclusion, non-dualism. But our problem is it doesn't look like that. We are full and free and perfect, but we feel that we are bound. How can we get over that? We have to purify the mind. And so that's our starting point. And philosophy, that's why we do all these classes. All these classes will tell us, hey, did you know that the world that you're looking at is not what you see, what it seems to be? Come on, look at it in a different way. Look at it from this way, from that way, from the other way. And scripture tells us many, many different varieties of things so that everyone can get something from everything. If we didn't catch it with one approach, we could use another approach. For example, revaluing the human body, and the Katha, the commentator says, ahead of very famous passage, says, since the subject is subtle, here's a different approach. Let's try a different approach. You didn't catch it the first time, try it another way. Any good teacher will say, oh, you didn't get it. Let's try something else. And so when you bring out 20, 30, 40 different solutions, one of them will catch on according to your own personality, and you'll get, yes, an exploratory moment, then, that's it. Yes, I understand now. Thank you. It's called the penny drops. I don't know what it is in European currency. So the penny drops. That's it. An aha moment. We need a series of these until they become so familiar that the whole of the unconscious mind becomes reformed. Knowing that we don't have direct access to it, we have to take the conscious mind and we have to feed the unconscious mind until the whole habit level becomes reformed and changed and elevated. Statistically, we have 51% purity, nobility, selflessness, called sattva, illumination, minimum 49% rajas and tamas, and you will never get 100% sattva, because then life is ended for us. It's no longer functional. So we want a majority of that, so that when we sit down for meditation, only these kinds of thoughts will come. Instead of sitting and growling at God, we deal with all the problems that we have in situ, there and then, seeing God right there and then. And that is why in the Bhagavad Gita, on the 6th chapter on meditation, he tells us that we should see the self in all beings and all beings in the self. And this is repeated so many times. It's repeated in the Isha Upanishad, the Katha Upanishad. Endlessly it's repeated. So let us go through a little bit and see where we are in terms of steadying the mind. And when the mind is steadied, and when the mind is quiet, and when the mind no longer has all these disturbing things, and when the mind now is full with noble thoughts, may noble thoughts come to us from all sides as a prayer from the Rig Veda, then at that moment we can make a running commentary. We can take the stream of ideas, we can canalize them nicely in a themed way, and lead them to a point where a kind of inner realization, revelation happens. And before that, there's a quiet moment, there's a point. There's a point where there's complete silence, a kind of atmosphere, a kind of inner light. And from there, we find the grace, divine grace coming as a message for us, as an inspiration, and as a flow also that leads us into the deeper accesses, or the deeper recesses, I should say, of the innermost heart, that divine origin which is there. So, the 6th chapter will tell us for the person of meditation or contemplation who wants to attain this unity, this inner silence, this oneness, then action is said to be the means. It starts off really with how we live our life outside the formal realm of seated meditation. This requires an element of self-discipline. The self-disciplined and serene man remains steadfast in the Supreme Self and remains there regardless of what the weather is outside, described as pairs of opposites, cold and heat, pleasure and pain, honor and dishonor, all of these things. Jitatmanaha prashantasya paramatma samahitaha. The self-disciplined and serene person remains steady like a rock in all circumstances. And then when you sit for meditation, you can say, I am steady, I am strong as adamantine, like a rock, I will not move from here until some inner opening occurs through some inner response to my willingness to be open. And that inner response is called the inner realm, the inner exploration, the mystic journey, and meditation. Elevating oneself to the point where we are ready for meditation. And then this person, this spiritual practitioner, you think you're an ordinary person, but when you take up this endeavor, you're a yogi. And a yogi should always try to concentrate the mind, living alone in solitude, in other words, quietness, quietude. If you sit down in meditation and there's a whole lot of traffic that comes in, the chances are that your waking life, normally engaged in work or in families or domestic concerns, is noisy. You know, if you grow up in a noisy household where everybody's shouting and what have you, and in your adulthood, you'll adopt the same stance. You'll be a shouting kind of person. And the moments of quiet are treasured moments. You know yourself. Those precious moments, for example, when you view a breathtaking scene. The breathtaking scene is where complete silence is there. A sense of awe, a sense of wonder, an internal rapture of joy, and it could happen even just for a moment. Supposing we register this as a memory and decide to bring it back during meditation and construct some beautiful ideas about that. Well, we can't do it if there is competition in the mind. If other thoughts are coming in, trying to compete. And that is why there is a stage in meditation, or the meditation process, in constructing our runway that is necessary for meditation. It's called pratyahara. It means that preceding concentration, the mind has to be conditioned to a point where it is receptive. A kind of point of silence. It's a bit like if you have a busy whiteboard or blackboard, rub it all off, and then once you've rubbed it all off, it's blank. You can then put what you want, and whatever you're putting in a concentrated way, in a directed way, in a planned dream way, is called dharana, concentration. And it won't happen if it has competing thoughts going on. So we have to take all the opposing bundles, all these samskaras that are in the mind, we have to remove them. We have to, for example, let's say, take the teacher's picture or a divine picture and think on it, bow down to it, mentally put God there. In meditation, there are your own pictures. They're formed from your own mind, from your vast storage of mental photographs that you have. And then you become what you meditate upon, is the rule. Now we have really come to an age where we're disconnected with the sense realities that can be elevated as divine experiences. And I often laugh at an image, I suppose, of tourists, certain tourists. They're traveling together as a group, and they come to a great cathedral, a wonderful work of culture and art and architecture. They say, oh, okay, half of you go and do the inside, we'll do the outside. Means take photographs. Well, you could do these days, you could view it on the internet. You didn't have to travel miles and miles to a special place where tourists gather. But you see, there's no substitute for actually being there. I know a man, he's a remarkable man. He can tell you about every major city in the world. He can describe all the buildings, the museums, the streets, everything, but he's never been there. It's all in his head. It's all gathered information. And he has no idea what the place smells like, what the sounds of people around him, if he were there, would be heard, what the sound would be like. He had no idea what the smells and scents and sights and all of the movements, the atmosphere, the conversations, none of that he would have any idea about. You know, in this day and age, people talk a lot about artificial intelligence, that maybe robots will take over the world, something like that. That machines can do that, but they can't process meaning. That's the problem. So they can't really know what is it to be loved, what is it to be to feel anguish, what is it to experience certain sights and sounds, how to respond to that, what the inner feeling is like, how a dream feels like. All of these human sensations are absent to a machine. And so when we go to a place, the tendency is to use our technology. I was telling this over the weekend, and take a photograph and disconnect from the experience just to capture it for future reference. To employ the senses. When we go on retreat, one of the things that I encourage people to do is go for a walk and register all the sensations that you don't normally find, that you bypass, that you take for granted. Why don't you put your hand on the bark of a tree, feel its roughness, feel how it feels, and understand there's a soul in the tree, there's a living entity. Connect with the tree. People used to laugh at people in the 1960s, tree huggers they used to call them, But yes, that's a form of life. Our system says that every form of life, every organic form has a kind of spirit within it that develops. And look at the pleasure that forests give us, and that trees and foliage and flowers and all the things that we regard and categorize as typically nature, with the misunderstanding, actually everything in life is nature. The whole thing, the whole experience is nature. Feeling the pleasure of the rays of the sun on the skin, not overly so. We can get into trouble like that. Smelling, so that, in other words, every single sensation that we have we're not detaching from it. We're engaging in it and adding an extra dimension of joy, registering it to God's account and saying, this is your grace, this is your glory, this is your divine presence in every single object of the senses. A world-affirming position from a non-dualistic point of view that says there's only oneness looking like this, and I won't be duped in it, but that doesn't mean to say I won't enjoy the experience of it. Let me do it. So this pratyahara, this withdrawing, practically speaking, will be not to repress any of the noises going on in the mind. Supposing we've conditioned the mind nicely day after day after day by feeling the presence of the divine everywhere with us, feeling that he or she is a companion walking with us, enjoying and basking in the divine presence at every moment, doing every activity as a karma yoga. That means doing it with the idea of mindfulness, with equilibrium of mind, with no attachment or desire for the fruits of your activities. Supposing that's your daily condition, second by second, you play this game of life, you engage in the art of living, you'll find you have no anxiety and no stress. And that condition, when you sit down, there will also be no anxiety and no stress in meditation. And step by step, you follow a process. And when you come to this position of pratyahara, allow all these thoughts which are remnant in you to come and go through the mental field. Watch them, allow them to come, allow them to go. Be patient and wait. Wait for the gap. Wait for the mind to tire. And when the mind has no other occupation, it's a bit like taking a dog for a walk, allow it to sniff everywhere it likes. It'll come back to you. Wait for that moment. And at that particular moment, you have your blank board, not blackboard, blank board. You have that small gap. In many ways, when you cultivate this, it is actually called yoga nidra. It is a kind of sleep, but not an abandonment. There's a consciousness, there's an awareness, this acute awareness, this an awakening moment where you realize there's a potential creativity moment before something can be constructed and emerges as a planned dream, a journey constructed by yourself, taking out the finest thoughts, the finest scenes of your choice. And remember, in meditation, there are no personal pronouns. Personal pronouns, I, and so on, have no place in meditation, and future tense has no place in meditation. Your own pictures are formed. Meditation can be, is when done properly, meditation is pleasant. It slows down your breathing and heartbeat without you having to go and do all this pranayama. It itself slows down the breathing and regulates the heartbeat. It's like a complete holiday. Meditation is the melting, the fixing, the mold or transform of the selected material that is seen with the very eyes, and you replay it. And it's not good to cut out thought by repeating Om or some other thing. Instead, feed in good thoughts of immortality and God's strength and truth and beauty and goodness and love and all that. One big mistake is to try to make the mind blank. Don't do it. But there's a difference between that poise, that sense of poise, which is a creative moment where you now insert your ideas. And this is called dharana, or concentration. A stream of ideas toward a common goal. That is your own divinity expressed theistically as the divine presence. In fact, in theistic meditation is really practicing the divine presence. You can observe the thought waves. You can observe all the impressions. And then you can neutralize them with thoughts of the divine. And then beam them towards the field. And in order to restrict the mind from wandering, you have to intelligently occupy it by keeping it on things of art and beauty. You have to look at the world in a different way, seeing the artistic aspect of it, the beautiful aspect of it. Art and culture are important in meditation. Daydreaming. Daydreaming should be switched onto positive channels. And so meditation is really a new dimension which will tide us over all our miseries. It's a power, it has a power, and the power is to move heaven and earth. So you can't ask, what meditation can I get or can I make to get God's grace? The very fact that you meditate is an expression of that very grace. The thought flowing is God's grace flowing. And it doesn't matter what you do in the field. The playback is from Him. So in meditation, you count upon the fact that second by second, you can put an original thought through of your own. So free meditation is very powerful meditation. And control of the senses is the prerequisite. And it's difficult when the outside instrument, that is the sense organs, are used. The real sense organ is internal. We know this. And in meditation, we see that. We use these internal organs. And control of the sense organs starts with the early part of meditation, in which the steps are taken beforehand to control the memory. And so meditation, the meditation center has, of course, its adjacent center of doubt and fear and all this disturbance. And we have to use our sense of discrimination and don't tune that center. So we make thoughts about beauty and art and religious praises and processions. Bring those up. Because we've all been there. We don't have to entertain all the disturbing voices that we see would seem to arrive. We can say, thank you very much. Do you remember we went on this journey? We went on a pilgrimage, we visited a temple. Recall the atmosphere there, how we felt, how the mind was elevated. And so it's a question of, when thoughts of Rajas and Tamas come, encourage them for a short while, no doubt, and then gently stop them in a kind of mathematical way, that is, replacing more, numerically more, with pure thoughts, good thoughts of art and beauty and culture and nobility. Allow them for let's say 4 seconds. And then for 16 seconds, put in your thoughts until you get a surplus of 12 or a net surplus of 12. Put in thoughts of a sattvic nature. And these exercises should be repeated, like breathing, continuously, not just when you're in trouble, but make it a continuous practice. The thought current shouldn't be fought with. Allow it to play for a while. And then put in your sattvic thought. That's how you deal with so-called disturbances in the mind. Until you get to a point, that point of poise, where you are in a listening mode, where you're tuned to the voice of God. And when that happens, you're a recipient. You're not actively doing anything. So I hope that helps in answering your question, the first question.
But my question was, so when you are listening to this voice of God, what do you expect the answer to be? Or
You see, that's my whole point. If you expect anything, you're not listening. There's no expectation. Why should there be an expectation? The rule in meditation is there's no personal pronoun, there's no I, and there's no future tense. Expectation is in the future. So do we have any examples? Yes. When you go to a beautiful place, let's say on a holiday, many people like to go to the sea and the beach and see the horizon, because I think that's where we made our transformation from monkeys to humans, biologically speaking. So when you go there, what's your expectation? No expectation. You see a beautiful sunset, for example, these days, as they say, you'll see these beautiful colors in the evening. Well, what's your expectation? That should be different color? That should last longer? So the question of expectation doesn't arise when it comes to these things. Expectation has within it egoism. Expecting something for who? For me. That's the problem.
but when you say listening, listening to the silence or listening to, I mean, what is the sound of God that I'm listening to?
Okay, so you see, before something is told, now you have asked a question, okay? Before I answer, I can pause. And in that sense, I suppose there's an expectation of what is about to be told within the listening period, So listening means being completely open and receptive to what is about to be told. And it's not in human language or human words or anything like this. It's as an idea, an inspiring idea. Or it's in terms of an elevating feeling. It carries with it a sense of attunement, a sense of oneness, a sense of familiarity, a sense of inspiration, a sense of warmth. It's not tangible. It's not listening in the human sense. It's not listening in the audial sense. It's waiting and seeing what happens. Being alert, being receptive, being open. If you ask a flower when you are open, fully open, what's your expectation? Who are you waiting for? The next bus? The next bee? No. My nature is to open. Whatever happens after that happens. You see, so in a sense, it's a bit like people in Rajasthan. Of course, there's Mount Abu. Hundreds and thousands of people go to witness the sun. I'm not sure it's the sunrise or the sunset. I think it's the sunset. And the sun goes down exactly in the valley between two mountains. And so what's expectation? Even now, in the Jewish tradition, for example, they take the day as right now, because night for them is really just the expectation, if you will, you want to use that language, of the dawn. But when the dawn comes, then don't go and do the cleaning. So get the experience. And that's the point. That's the point. So that's that moment of oneness, that moment of alliance, that gives you a revealing, inspiring moment. And it's not you cannot tangibly express what it is, but you'll know what it is. That's the idea. You see, to listen properly, you have to put all your egoistic things aside, and you have to have this openness and not put your own interpolations in. In ordinary listening, that's like that. In ordinary listening, you can tell when somebody is not listening. If somebody is speaking and the other person is formulating all the answers in their own heads, or the next question in their own heads, they're clearly not listening. It requires full attention. And we could easily interchange the terms of listening to being completely alert to divine possibilities. That moment of poise where something gets filled. And if we are filling it ourselves, our own thoughts and so on and so forth, it's not going to work. We have to allow the divine to fill us as a vessel is filled. And these are often called by different terms: self-surrender, aligning our own individual will with the divine will, allowing ourselves to be loved, allowing ourselves to be filled with divine grace. Those kinds of concepts would be there. And then I think you had a second question, isn't it?
Yes, so the second question was about this word passion and the ideals of Bhagavad Gita and the ancient times versus the modern times. So in the ancient times, the ideal would be somebody who is of steady wisdom, who is dispassionate, who is non-attached, who doesn't show emotions. So Ram would go to the forest and he wouldn't be sad about it, or at least he wouldn't show any sadness about it. In modern world, one is expected to be passionate about the job. One is expected to show emotions. You can't be cold and emotionless. So I was just wondering how has the ideal changed, and does the old ideals of being dispassionate and being not being affected by all these dualities, do they still hold in the modern society?
Well, one thing about the modern society, does it give us calmness and a stress-free life, or does it agitate us tremendously and fill ourselves with unrealistic expectations and nervousness? That's my counter question. The fact that modern times have different expectations doesn't mean to say it's correct or helpful. And the scriptural injunctions are true for all times. We can't say the old days is one set of values and the new days is another set of values. If they're true for all time. They're valid for everything, every circumstance. Because the psychology has to be valid, because we're all suffering from the same thing, whether it was 1,000 years ago or whether it is yesterday. What are the things that are disturbing the mind? Well, anxiety. Anxiety causes more distress and tiredness than anything else. You come home, say from work, feel absolutely exhausted, something like that. It's not because there was anything physically stressful in your work, because you sat there the whole day. It's not that you played 100 rounds of golf or something. It's not that you ran 1,000 kilometers or something. No, You feel as if you did. It is anxiety. Anxiety means I'm doing something here, I'd rather be doing something else there. And so this is where karma yoga comes in. Karma yoga says that you take karma, that is any action, any activity, but you do away with the expectations of the results, because that's what's making anxiety for you. To do all the actions with equilibrium of mind and to do it also efficiently is the definition in the Bhagavad Gita of what is karma yoga. That is what is yoga. And of course, the whole chapters up to, let's say, chapter 5 is to do, other than laying out the basic principles, is really on emphasis of karma yoga, where you put all your energy into the unit task. That's called concentration. And energy, feelings, is part of that energy. And we know that concentration in your activities happens when you're in the zone, is a favorite word, a favorite expression. I was giving a talk last night, and we were discussing a certain neuropsychologist, and he had a theory of a flow that involved a number of different factors. First of all, that has got to be a balance between your skill and a balance between the realistic task at hand. There's got to be an enthusiasm for it. Now, bearing in mind that the sole purpose of our life would be to see God, or the sole purpose of our life would be to attain our freedom, to access our inherent freedom that we already have, and the whole of life is moving toward it. Bearing that in mind, the finest techniques that we can use will be toward that. And that requires the mind to be steady and calm. It doesn't mean to say it's passionless. It means to say that we take passion and we steer it in a more uplifting direction. And so we come back to this operation of the three gunas. What is spiritual life? The development and promotion and sustaining of this quality of sattva, purity of the mind. And we make every effort to shift the gears. That is, when we find ourselves in a morose state, a state of kind of laziness and lethargy, then we acknowledge it and we shift the gear up and make ourselves entirely active. But the problem is that Rajas and Tamas have an inherent pain that goes with it, because it is all to do with anxiety, it is to do with doubt, it is all to do with negative feelings. The positive feelings comes in when we elevate that to a sense of joy. And joy is a passion, joy is an emotion. It's not that we are cold and emotionless. It's just that we are steady. When hot comes, when cold comes, when pairs of opposite comes, matra, barshastu kuntaya, shitosna sukha dukha daha, agama payino nityas, tamastik to sattva bharata. Notions of heat and cold, pain and pleasure are born only of the contact of the senses with their objects. They have a beginning and they have an end. They're impermanent in their nature. We have to bear them patiently, because it's a good strategy, that's why. Why should we agitate our minds? Why don't we just bear them patiently? And then it goes on. Yam hina vyata yante ite purusham purusha salbha samadukha sukham dhiram samutatvaya kalpate. The person who is calm, who is the same in all these conditions, in pain, in pleasure, whom these cannot disturb, that person alone is able to attain to immortality. It's not about the eras, it's not about old-fashioned ideas. It's about a formula that works. We should take these ideas and put them into the modern world. And the more we do that, the calmer we'll be, the less agitated we'll be, and the more the body will be free from disease caused by stress, caused by wrong thinking, caused by negativity, where every thought has its vibrating effect in the human body, rightly or wrongly, good or bad. So we have to make this distinction, because the next passage goes that the unreal, see, the unreal never is, the real never is not, and so on. People possessed of knowledge of the truth, they know both of these, those kinds of passages like that. You see, our assessment of the world has to change, and more, I think, because of material technology and what have you, I think people are more inclined to endorse the world as their reference point. So we want success in this world, and everything is geared toward that, and somehow we are persuaded that this is a worthwhile endeavor, whereas what we are saying is, our worthwhile endeavor is to take all our skills, our talents and abilities and our passions and elevate them in a divine way, in such a way that we would not get stressed. We would have an equilibrium of mind, living in this present moment, not the future, not. So many difficulties arise because people commiserate over the past. And so many difficulties arise because of expectations and anxieties and so on of the future. But this is all driven by Rajas. This is all driven by Rajas. And that's only half the gear. The car moves better when you go into the top gear. You take that Rajas and elevate it to Sattva, so that every activity we engage in with all our energy, with all our passion, but with an inner equanimity, because we're not attached to the fruits or the effects of all the activities. And that's where you'll get practical calmness of mind. It's a wonderful formula. It should be taught everywhere in business. It should be taught everywhere in life. And in fairness, people are rallying around to this concept of mindfulness. Because what we're talking about is a variety of mindfulness that has the effect of elevating the mind. Now, the two things the mind can be: mindful, that is full of everything, all kinds of nonsense, or mindful, that is, the mind is fully attentive. Walking is a moment where we can be mindful. Working are moments where we can be mindful. Even traveling are moments where we can be mindful. Every single aspect of the day can employ a kind of mindfulness, but you see, it's not just mindfulness of the movement of a body or the sensation. We have to go a little further and register it. The divine is there expressed in this way. I think that's what's missing from the modern interpretation of the implementation of mindfulness. To actually, if you lay your foot down on stones and feel the sensation of all the ground, every ridge, every aspect of the ground connecting with the bottom of your foot, and you're aware of it, that's wonderful. Now go one step further. You can mentally repeat, the earth is the Lord's footstool, and I am the way, and Lord, you are there in this sensation of movement. It is you that is moving. I am not doing anything. You are the mover. All action is attributed to you. And so there's a prayerfulness that goes with mindfulness that will get the better value from it.
So you said that the equilibrium of mind is not being passionless, but it is directing the passion in a way that removes the anxiety and stress.
Yes. Because you see, it puts the mind in a state of it takes the mind out of anxiety or agitation. In the language of the gunas, it neutralizes rajas and tamas. And rajas and tamas are blockages in the way of this joy and result in pain. Well, why would you induce pain willingly? It's only ignorance. Ignorance, it's a thought that says, okay, life is like this and I have to deal with it. No. You're dealing with what is called Maya. Not exactly illusion, as is interpreted in many places, no. But Maya is an inscrutable thing that deludes us into taking this world at face value. Thinking that this world is permanent, where it's not, it's momentary. Taking this thing to be solid, and it's not, it's changing. And the beauty about the various approaches in the Vedanta philosophy is to convince ourselves so that we become discriminating people. And we realize, well, actually, nothing lasts, nothing's solid, nothing's gained, and nothing's lost. There's a series of divine waves flowing. We have to convince ourselves of these things, and this is called viveka, this is discernment. Sorting out what is real, what is unreal, leading us, in effect, from the ignorance of darkness to the light of knowledge, and effectively transcending death, means from death to immortality. This is the prayer. Vasato masat gamayanso. So we have to have great passion for what we do, because we have a passion for God, and we're doing it for God, and it's God's service. And that creates an equilibrium of the mind, and means that we can transform any potential discord which is there into harmony, a kind of manufacturing process. Discord comes, okay, very good. We can take it as our raw material, put it through the factory, the mental factory. Harmony comes out at the other end. All right. So these are two very good questions. I hope we've dealt with them nicely. And so I'll ask, are there any other questions? And how can we be sure it comes from God? Let's see. How can we be sure it comes from God? It's a good question. How can we be sure anything comes from God? If you're aligned to God, you'll be sure it comes from Him or her or whatever you view God as. So when you have a friend and you know their voice, then you know it's not somebody else. When you see that person's face, you know it's not somebody else. You see, that is the wonderful prayer of Jesus. The Our Father, teach us how to pray. Okay, it's a simple prayer. It's a devotional prayer. It's a basic, realistically human prayer. But it comes to thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. In other words, that my will, my small will, align to the divine will, and with that, there's only one line, only one voice, only one message. And if it is laden with selfishness, know that it is not God's voice, know that it is mine. You see, theology puts it in the personality of Satan, which, of course, doesn't really mean anything except an adversary. So that's what it means, you know. And it is the contact of Judaism with Zoroastrianism, with the Persian culture, that brings about this whole concept of a fallen angel and all the rest of it, and puts us in a position where somehow we have to have an anti-God. Well, you have matter, you must have antimatter. You have God, you must have an anti-God called Satan, and so on and so forth. So that's the theologian's point of view. Swami Vivekananda said, if I was to look for a Satan, I would look for it in the ego. So it is your own voice. And if it's your own voice, be guaranteed it's going to be selfish. If it's made from truth and and completely selfless, if it is for the common good and so on, this is God's voice. But you see, God's voice is not necessarily like that. It could be a flow of sweetness. You see, it could be something that is, to the normal senses, intangible. It is really allowing divine grace to flow in us and through us and beyond us to others. That's really what it means. And the idea, you see, of listening means that we have to correspondingly immerse ourselves in silence and be waiting. Now, you see, silence means not just external silence, it's also internal silence, calming the innumerable voices that demand our attention. And we have to deal with them by dealing with things in situ, cultivating the mind in such a way that meditation is simply a deepening of our normal state of mind. Just a continuation of our holiness in our normal life, that's all. Well, it is 2100 hours, it's 9 o'clock here, so I think we leave it at that. Thank you. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.